afternoon, everyone. We're excited to have you join us today. My name is Michelle Adels, and I am the Vice President of Social Media for the New Jersey chapter of the National Association of African Americans in Human Resources. We are thrilled to present Checkmate, the Art of Strategic Thinking, as part of our ongoing In the Know webinar series. These events are bite-sized learning sessions that are conducted during the lunch hour, and they are designed to address hot topics in human resources. Can't go. We thank you for your patience as we just work out a few technical glitches.
Hi, Taylor. Could you help with the advancing of the slides?
Yes, of course.
Great, thanks, Taylor. For those of you new to NAR, New Jersey, NAR is committed to expanding the presence and leadership abilities in minority talent at all levels across all industries, both nationally and globally. 4,000 plus members strong, and with over 35 chapters across the country, we provide conferences, symposiums, and other opportunities for professional development in a way that broadens exposure of the HR profession to our constituents. Many of our members are affiliated with other professional and trade organizations, but find their local NAR chapter to be a valued resource for shared learning, cross-functional collaboration, and personal growth opportunities. Our mission is simple: to be a national forum where Black and African American HR practitioners and those aligned with our goals can make a real difference. By sharing information and leading through critical business issues, we can impact careers and the global workforce in a tangible way. Of course, the In the Know webinar series would not be possible without our technology sponsor, Universum. They are providing the webinar platform that's being used for today's session, and we offer many thanks to them for their ongoing support of NAR New Jersey and our events. We are very excited to have fellow NAR New Jersey board members who have a combined 35 plus years of experience in learning and development leading today's webinar. Talithia M. Best is our chapter president. Talithia is founder and CEO of Best Consulting Group, a specialty consulting practice focused on strategic business mentoring, organizational effectiveness, talent development, and diversity and inclusion. Vanessa Phipps is the Vice President of Membership. Vanessa is a senior learning consultant at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, where she has oversight for the design and delivery of the organization's leadership development curriculum. Before we get started, let's review a few housekeeping items. Now, today's session promises to be highly interactive, so it'll be a little tough to multitask on this one. We really want and need your input and participation. So be prepared to raise your hands, type a few words in chat, and give your opinion in polls that will be conducted throughout the webinar. So please pay close attention, be involved, and be engaged. And finally, remember, for those of you who registered by May 31st for today's event, our virtual raffle for the free 30-minute StrengthsFinders coaching session will take place at the end of today's webinar. You have to be present to win, so please be sure to stick around. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Vanessa Phipps to kick off today's webinar, Checkmate, the Art of Strategic Thinking. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you very much. And I will begin this session in the same way that we will end it, and that is by thanking all of you for participating and for spending your lunch hour with us. Let's get started. I think we're going to start by allowing you to practice using that raised hand option that Michelle mentioned. Go back, Taylor. Raise your hand if you've ever played chess. Anybody of you have ever played chess? If you have.
Claudia.
Oh, Claudia has. Okay. So whether or not you've ever had the opportunity to sit across the chessboard from someone, you probably know that the strategy in chess involves evaluating the value, the position, and the control of the pieces on the board in a way that allows you to set some goals for play. And just as becoming a chess master requires practice and cultivation, so does the practice and process of strategic thinking. Next slide. So before we can even talk about thinking strategically, we need to be able to define business strategy. So I will spend a few minutes talking about what a business strategy is, and then I will turn the session over to Talithia, and she will walk you through some tools that you can use to support you in your efforts to thinking more strategically on an ongoing basis. We're going to wrap up with a bit of a turn in the session and talk about how you can use some of those same skills for your own growth and success. Next slide. So let's start with a polling question. You know from the bio that I actually work for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, but I'd like to learn a bit more about the rest of you. So the polling question is around which industries are represented today. So please choose from a corporation, if you are in higher ed, if you work for a not-for-profit, if you're in business for yourself, or other.
Okay, Taylor, you can show the results now.
Okay, so half of our attendees work for corporations. Got the other quarter working in not-for-profits, and quite a few entrepreneurs on the line, so that's great. Thank you. So Michelle promised that you wouldn't have an opportunity probably even to take a bite of your sandwich or to multitask. So the second polling question, we'd like to have an idea of what strategic initiatives you have been involved in thus far, or how deep a dive you've had into strategic work. So select from one of the following. If you're participating currently, if you've been involved in creating or developing a strategic plan, if you are participating or have participated in a planning session, if you've executed on a plan, or if to date you've had no involvement.
Okay, Taylor, let's take a look at the results you've got so far.
Wow. So half of our attendees have actually led or are currently participating in some strategic planning work, which is amazing. And then our second group has participated in a strategic planning session. So we have a bunch of smarties on our call today. I love it. Thank you. So let's talk about what a business strategy is. One of the major challenges of defining strategy is that there's so much room for interpretation. Different companies define it differently, even different business units define it differently, and most companies are quite adept at training their employees on the operational skills, like customer service or how to sell their products or manage their people, but they don't talk about how they define strategy and are therefore able to develop a strategy statement. So oftentimes you get companies and at the beginning of the year you see what their strategy is for the year, but have no idea what sort of went into planning that strategy or that strategy statement. So, Taylor, please click. For now, let's think of strategy as the intelligent allocation of limited resources through a unique system of activities to outperform the competition. So, intelligent allocation, unique activities, and obviously designed to outperform the competition in serving the customer base. Next slide, please. So let's talk a bit, now that we've talked about what strategy is, we have to talk about what it isn't. And we're going to start with aspiration. Aspiration is the what, and that should never be confused with strategy, which is the how. If, for instance, Dr. Scholes said to you that they wanted to be the premier provider of your foot care products, that's all well and good, but that is not telling you how they plan to do that. And so behind the scenes, all their employees should be well aware of what it is that they intend to do on an ongoing basis to make certain that they are the premier provider of such. Best practices. Obviously, best practices are okay for the operational side of a business. You always want to know who's doing what and how well they're doing it. But they can erode the competitive advantage if my best practice, for example, is, let me give you an example. If I'm trying to break into the fast food business, the hamburger business, and I'm following McDonald's or Burger King strategies, then where's the differentiation? And when I talk about differentiation, I mean either performing different activities from the competition and or performing similar activities in a different way from the competition. And remember, we talked about business strategy needing to have a unique approach to outperform the competition. So maybe I become Dave Thomas, and I come up with the first burger that's fresh and never frozen. Or maybe I'm even White Castle, which, by the way, Time Magazine named as the most influential burger of all time. So how about that? The company that had the first slider. And so for all of you who went to college and remember making those 1 a.m. runs for those 30 bags of little burgers, now you don't have to be embarrassed by that, because obviously they had a huge influence on the burger industry. So let's finally talk about caution. Organizations that are risk-averse miss out on opportunities to move ahead and to become strategic thinkers on an ongoing basis. Caution means sometimes that people potentially lose the opportunity to have a short-term loss of revenue that could result in a long-term gain and an approach to doing something new, something different, and something that could trump the competition. Next slide. And so putting all of that together, we are, for this session, going to define strategic thinking as the generation and application of business insights on a continual basis to achieve a competitive advantage. So now I'd like to turn the session over to my colleague, Talithia, and she's going to walk you through some of the tools that you can use to think more strategically.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We so appreciate you being here. By quick show of hands, how many of you have read or read a similar definition or have used similar language when describing strategic thinking? Click on your hand button if some of that language that Vanessa just shared was familiar, identical, or similar. Yeah, so there is some connection to some of that language in terms of how strategic thinking is defined. Research on leadership by the American Management Association has shown that the most important competency for a leader is that ability to develop strategy. Unfortunately, though, when researchers examined leaders at all levels in the organization, they only found that 4% could be strategists. Vanessa shared with us earlier that that definition of strategic thinking, this ability to generate and apply insights on a continual basis to achieve competitive advantage, knowing that definition alone doesn't really move you closer to practical application. When working with an intangible concept like strategy, it's really important to try to find a way to tack it on to a more concrete framework. So with that being said, let's take another poll. And with this polling question, I'd like to know the 3 disciplines of strategic thinking. If you were to take a guess, what are the 3 disciplines of strategic thinking? People, strategy, and process, customers, competitors, and company, or acumen, allocation, and action? What combination do you think best describes what the 3 disciplines of strategic thinking are? I'll give you a few seconds to select your answer. If I had some Jeopardy music, I'd be playing it right about now. Okay, Taylor, you can show the responses. Okay, mixed bag. So 40% of you thought it was the first choice, people, strategy, and process. The smallest number of you felt it was the middle choice, customers, competitors, and company. The third choice, acumen, allocation, and action, is indeed the correct answer. Acumen, allocation, and action represent what are often called the 3 A's of strategic thinking. The 3 A's provide this simple framework that can be used for applying strategic thinking in real-world issues. It provides you with confidence, kind of the mental strength, that agility needed to navigate complex landscapes and environments with respect to strategic thinking. So acumen, what is acumen? It's about how you go about gaining new insights, how you generate new ideas, how you garner new perspectives that help you get below the surface. One of the most interesting paradoxes of strategy is that in order to elevate your thinking to see the big picture, you actually need to take a deep dive below the surface of issues to uncover the insight. A strategic insight is a new idea that combines 2 or more pieces of information to affect the overall success of the business and lead to competitive advantage. And an iceberg is one of the best illustrations of how companies use insight. Universally, organizations battle one another using only obvious information, which can be represented by the tip of the iceberg. That tip, however, doesn't really reveal the insights hidden below the surface of the business. And relying on that information at the tip, what's in plain sight, doesn't really require any extra effort. So since the information is readily available to the entire market, it quickly loses its value when you're trying to develop a strategy that ultimately relies on differentiation and competitive advantage. So that's acumen. Allocation is the second discipline of strategic thinking. Once insights have been generated through the acumen discipline, you have the key ingredient needed for making resource allocation decisions. Remember how Vanessa's definition of business strategy began with the intelligent allocation of limited resources? Resource allocation is at the core of strategy. Discussions of strategy ultimately boil down to how to allocate limited resources to maximize business potential. So let me read to you this short anecdote written by an assistant comptroller who was going on a site visit and made an interesting observation. I received for editing a capital request from the division for a large chimney. I couldn't see what anyone could do with just a chimney, so I flew out to the site for the visit myself. They've built and equipped a whole new plant on expense orders. The chimney is the only indivisible item that exceeded the $50,000 limit we put on the expense orders. Apparently, they learned informally that a new plant wouldn't be favorably received, and since they thought the business needed it and the return would justify it, they just built the damn thing. I have no idea what I'm going to say to these people. While it's one thing to have a neatly written strategy on paper, the truth is that the actual or realized strategy of an organization is the result of the resource allocation decisions made by managers each and every day. So when these decisions are made based on information, what's at the tip of the iceberg, rather than insights, what's below the surface, they tend to be toward status quo and lack innovation. It's critical to have a firm understanding of resource allocation and how to maximize its potential for your organization. The third and final discipline of strategic thinking is action. Our sense of importance seems to be tied to how busy we are sometimes. I have this infamous Ernest Hemingway quote in my office that says, "Never confuse movement with action." In other words, busyness does not equate with business. Often, we assume that once a sound strategy has been formed, the execution of that strategy will kind of take care of itself. And we've definitely had research to indicate otherwise. A survey of more than 400 companies showed that 49% of business leaders report a gap between their organization's abilities to articulate a strategic vision and their effectiveness in executing that vision. And additionally, 64% of executives don't believe that don't believe that organizations even have the ability to close these gaps. So it's important to have an action plan that points out what will be done by whom and by when. Okay, Taylor, next slide. So, now that you've got an idea of what the three key disciplines are, the next question is what kinds of tools are available to help you make these disciplines come to life. This slide just gives you just a taste of some of the tools categorized by discipline that are used often. From an acumen, where acumen is concerned, I list three different types of tools: the SWOT analysis, the PEST analysis, and the McKinsey 7S structure. The SWOT analysis tends to be the most popular. It's a powerful technique for understanding your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that you face. Used in a business context, it helps you to carve out a sustainable niche in your market. And used in a more personal context, it helps you develop your career in a way that takes best advantage of your talents, abilities, and opportunities. The PEST analysis. PEST stands for political, economic, sociocultural, and technological environment. PEST analysis is another simple, useful way and widely used that helps you to understand the big picture. And as such, it's used by business leaders worldwide to build their vision of the future in a really robust way. And finally, the McKinsey 7S structure is built on what they call the 7 S's: structure, strategy, systems, skills, style, staff, and shared values. This model is most often used as a tool to assess and monitor changes in the internal situation of an organization. And the model is based on the theory that for an organization to perform well, these 7 elements need to be aligned and mutually reinforcing. The model can also be used to understand how the organizational elements are interrelated, and so to ensure that the wider impact of changes made in one area are taken into consideration. So those are acumen tools that can be used. Allocation. When I think of allocation, I think of a tree. In particular, when it comes to strategy, think about what can be learned from a tree. An apple falling from a tree inspired Sir Isaac Newton's discovery of the law of gravity. The expression "can't see the forest from the tree" is used to describe managers who are too tactical in nature, and I'm sure you could think of dozens of other things. If you have trees on your property at home, you're familiar with pruning or cutting off branches in order to produce strong, healthy, attractive trees. It's not the most glamorous activity. It's typically overlooked year after year, and when you've never pruned a tree, it can result in a decayed tree, a diseased tree, a tree that's stunted in growth or even growing out of control. How often are you pruning initiatives, activities, tactics from your business? Managers and organizations, large and small, are crying for more resources when they may already have all the resources that they need. They just have them tied up in traditional, unproductive tactics that add no value to customers. So when every opportunity that walks in the door receives resources, only 3 words I want you to remember: just say no. So examples of possible pruning tools that you can use include strategy profile, the trade-off matrix, and the start, stop, continue model. The strategy profile is a great tool for visualizing strategy on the competitive landscape. It compares different investment levels and resource allocation according to key industry factors that exist. The strategy profile provides insight in 3 really specific areas though. One being it helps to depict the factors that affect competition most within the industry. Secondly, it's able to give you a good at-a-glance view of both the current and potential competitors. And thirdly, it also gives you a good overview of where it's invested its resources and how it might invest in the future. So it's one of my favorites in terms of assessing the competitive landscape. And the effective follow-up to the strategy profile is what's called the trade-off matrix that can be used to assess trade-offs necessary to create a more effective strategy. It's a 4-quadrant matrix labeled with eliminate in the top left-hand corner, increase in the top right-hand corner, decrease in the bottom left-hand corner, and create in the bottom right-hand corner. And the idea is that you would take different factors, key factors within your industry, and determine which factors should not receive any resources. That would get placed in the eliminate quadrant. Which factors should get more resources? That would get placed in increase. What factors should get less? Placed in decrease. And then finally, which factors could be created that haven't been offered in the past at all? You would place in create. And the idea is that it helps you to prioritize what trade-offs make the most sense. And then finally, one of the simplest tools to help prioritize what you do and how you do it is the start, stop, continue approach. And it's simply you're listing what things you need to start doing, what things you need to stop doing, and what things you need to continue to do in order to prioritize and execute on your plan. all three represent just a few different ways that you can prune business initiatives that you come across. And then finally, in action, the action tools assist in helping you put more rigor around execution of your strategy. And I'll definitely describe both the GHOST framework and the strategy blueprint shortly when I show you how you put all of this together. First, though, I want to step back. We've discussed what the three disciplines of strategic thinking are. We've discussed just a few tools that can help strengthen some of the disciplines around strategic thinking. But for whatever reason, people seem to still find it tough to be effective at crafting strategy. So let's take another poll. And in this polling question, what, in your opinion, keeps employees from thinking strategically? Not enough knowledge about the business, belief that they're not in a position to influence change, current resources are outdated, or everyone's plate is already pretty full. What do you think keeps employees from thinking strategically? Okay, Taylor, let's see what everyone's responses are. Wow. Okay, so the largest response is the second choice. Belief that they're not in a position to influence change is the largest, followed by not enough knowledge about the business, and everyone's plate's pretty full. Really interesting. You know, if a management team is willing to take calculated risks and is intent on becoming more effective strategists, a good first step is to assess their baseline strategic thinking skills. You know, I'm thinking about how you wouldn't trust a physician who walked into the exam room where you're waiting, took one look at you, and wrote a prescription without asking any questions. So by the same token, asking questions to assess your team's baseline strategic thinking skills is an important starting point. This list of strategic thinking skills was developed by Rich Horwath. He's the author of Deep Dive, and this book is it's from this book that a lot of these themes that Vanessa and I are sharing with you today are coming from. He designed this list and did so as an objective way to evaluate a manager's strategic thinking skills by using a list of 50 questions. And these 50 questions are grouped under the 10 strategic thinking skills that you see here listed on this slide. And if I were to categorize these skills, I would tell you that the first half, the skills on the left-hand side, strategy, insight, context, competitive advantage, and value, might be the skills that will really help you hone in on looking at the big picture, you know, assessing the landscape, understanding what all is at play. Those skills in particular really hone in on that. And then the second set of skills, resource allocation, modeling, innovation, purpose, mental agility, they kind of speak to how you may prune the tactical parts of strategic thinking, how you not only get in the right mindset around where you need to focus, but also how you go about allocating resources in a way that can get the work done that you need done. There's a big difference between tossing the word strategic around in the conference room and knowing what it really means. Some form of assessment gives you critical insight on the key competence needed to be truly effective. So, I have another story for you, my architect story. An architect shows up at work, and it's a work site of a soon-to-be constructed, custom-designed home. And gathered around are numerous contractors, construction workers, electricians, plumbers, plasterers, you name it, a subcontractor is there. And the architect simply says, we'll be building a 5-bedroom, 4-bath contemporary house with cathedral ceilings in the entryway and a 3-car garage. Now go to work. Yeah, I bet the look on your face now is about the same as the look on the subcontractor's face when he walked away after saying, now go to work. He didn't leave a blueprint. He didn't leave anything in writing. The group had no clue what to do. This scene would never happen in a construction site, but it occurs quite frequently in business. Strategies are discussed and directions are given, but in many cases those strategies are never actually written down. So some people are working in general directions that they vaguely recall, while their colleagues are remembering an entirely different version of the strategy. If a strategy isn't written down, it doesn't exist. If it's not written down, how do you know? How do you know is the question. So whether you have a strategy formula, a strategy statement, or a strategy overview, it's all designed to provide managers with that skeletal framework for strategy and guide the process of channeling strategy from mind to paper. And when formulating what your strategy is, it's so important that it encompasses 4 key things: the what, the how, the who, and the impact. The what is the activity representing the purpose of the strategy. The how represents the general means or method of accomplishing the strategy. The who represents the audience the strategy is designed to reach. And the impact represents the desired result of developing and executing that strategy. So what are the commonly used terms that define your approach? Take a look at the next slide. A recent study conducted by Harris Interactive revealed that 63% of some 20,000 workers didn't have a clear understanding of their organization's goals and why they're trying to achieve them. A primary reason is the terms goal, objective, strategy, and tactic, what we refer to as GHOST, are often used incorrectly and or interchangeably. And this is the direct cause of poor strategy execution. Let's test what you know so far relative to goals, objectives, strategy, and tactics. A goal is the current purpose of the organization, the general outcome you're trying to achieve, or is it the specific outcome you're trying to achieve? How would you best define what a goal is? Choose your answer. And let's take a look at your results. The specific outcome you're trying to achieve is by far the largest percentage, and of course that is not the correct answer and is one of the myths most commonly known in terms of how a goal is defined. A goal is the general outcome that you're trying to achieve. Let's take a look at the slide and I'll break this down for you more. The goal is the general target of what you're focused on, what generally you're trying to achieve, whereas the objective is that specific outcome desired, what specifically you're trying to achieve. So let's break this down even further and take a look at a couple of examples. Examples of a goal: to become the market share leader, to strengthen core business, to reduce costs. Those are high level, those are overarching, those are general examples of goals. In contrast, the objective is far more specific. It's still the what, but it's the specific. Attain a 32% market share. Obtain 90% of senior leaders at the director level by 2016. It's specific, it's targeted, it's smart. Oftentimes folks interchangeably use the two, and objectives are confused with goals are treated like goals, but the reality is the goal represents the what in a general way, and the objective represents the what in a very specific way. So let's take another polling question and look at it in terms of strategy and tactics, keeping in mind how we just defined goals and objectives. Strategy and tactics represent how you'll achieve your goals and objectives, long and short-term goals, or a balanced scorecard indicating business performance. Which do you think best describes time? You're indeed correct. 83% defined strategy and tactics by how, which is exactly on point. Strategies represent the resource allocation plan that you'll use, how generally to achieve the goals, and it'll describe how generally you'll achieve your goals. Tactics, on the other hand, are those tangible activities and items that carry out the strategies, how specifically to achieve the goals. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of how this plays out. So examples of a strategy might look like redistribute all print advertising dollars to a PR campaign to highlight a competitor's weak profile, or create a new incentive program that goes beyond the paycheck. It's both describe a how in very general terms. The tactic, on the other hand, gets a little bit more specific. One-on-one meetings using the manager toolkit. Use meeting in a box materials across all staff meetings to launch a new incentive system. Or develop a functional online discussion group. All very specific, targeted action items that would be taken. A helpful way to remember the difference is by using what Rich Holworth referred to as his rule of touch example. If you can see it, feel it, touch it, it's most likely a tactic. So the manager toolkit in the example above, the meeting in a box, you know, the online discussion group, a sales brochure, a direct mail piece. Those are all things that you can actually see, touch, or feel. It's most likely going to be a tactic. If it can't be physically touched, like leveraging a specialty sales force with a single product focus, or creating a new incentive program that goes beyond the paycheck, it might be most likely a strategy. So we talked quite a bit about what the three disciplines are and how they're defined. We've talked a bit about examples that could be used to demonstrate each of those disciplines in a really tangible way. You got a glimpse at some of the skills that are helpful in helping you hone in on your strategic thinking capability. And then we started to make some distinctions in commonly used language when it comes to business strategy that are used oftentimes incorrectly or interchangeably. But the big question is, how do you put this all together to tell a comprehensive story around what your game plan is and how you plan to achieve it? And that's where the strategy blueprint comes into play. We sent out, as a part of our pre-read for today's webinar, Spartacus Casino Strategy Blueprint. By show of hands, did anyone have a chance to take a look at that or have it handy in front of them? Click on the hand icon to let me know if you had a chance to take a look at the Spartacus Casino plan. Okay, a couple folks have. Oh, let me scroll down a little bit more here. Okay, great. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, you can pull it out now. If not, you could definitely refer to it later. but it gives you a good illustration of what a two-page strategy blueprint might look like. And it's meant to serve as a real-time strategic action plan for your business. The purpose of this particular blueprint is to develop a full leadership and engagement plan for casino managers and employees that creates excitement for their upcoming opening of tables and beyond. The blueprint is made up of 7 different sections: market overview, company overview, a competitor strategy profile, key metrics, mission, staff and performance, and a ghost breakdown. So you see examples of goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics as it relates to this casino initiative. Since the majority of you don't have it in front of you, I won't grill you through a couple little pop quiz questions I was going to ask you in reference to what to look for with respect to this blueprint. But suffice it to say that based on our discussion about acumen, allocation, and action, this blueprint will give you some representation of all 3 disciplines at a glance and provide a high-level overview of your general approach to this, in this case, developing a full leadership and engagement plan for casino workers. So, we spent a lot of time focused on strategy from a business perspective, but what happens when we bring it a little bit closer to home and look at strategy in a more personal way? Vanessa, what are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely think, everyone, that we can apply those same strategic principles and disciplines to how we grow our own careers and show ourselves as being successful at work. So I'd love to talk a bit more about that. Thank you, T. Taylor, could you move the slide? And next slide. So you see popping up a couple of new marketing or business terms. We talked about differentiation when we described business strategy and the importance of differentiation in having an effective business strategy. Let's talk a bit, however, about what commodity-based businesses do first. They typically have to compete on cost because of their difficulty in being able to differentiate through their products or services. So if you think about products like cement or baking soda, and we can see similar thinking at work. Just another show of hands. If you are the only person in your company performing a very unique function, put your hand up. Anybody? Okay. So if not, what you really need to do is consider very thoughtful competitive advantage, either by doing something differently or by making people believe that you have the capacity to do so. I know in my organization there are almost half of our employees are in customer service roles. So it makes it difficult for them to differentiate, to take themselves away from being seen as a commodity to being seen as someone who's absolutely able to stand out and differentiate themselves and do something that goes above and beyond. But when you think about it, how much better are Nike's sweatbands, really, or sneakers than anybody else's? So what I'm really talking about here is developing your own USP. Now, I'd like for any of you brave volunteers to unmute and tell me what you think a USP stands for. Anybody?
Taylor, is it possible to unmute the attendees so folks can chime in?
Yes, one moment.
Muted.
Nope. Okay, Taylor, you can put everyone back in listen-only mode.
Okay.
Position. So it is the factor or consideration presented by a seller as the reason that what they do, their product or service, is different from and better than the service or product of their competitor. So again, all of us need to be able to think about what our own USP is. So let's move to differentiation as a strategy for businesses and for you. And we can even go back to that Nike example, because obviously they, based on what we see on all of the clothing that's worn by some of our top sports teams, they have certainly been able to differentiate themselves. So you may remember that I mentioned that differentiation is being able to highlight aspects of your business strategy that make you special. So it could mean adding attractive features or functionality. For you personally and professionally, it should mean delivering something that's crucial to the organization's success and doing it in a superb fashion. It's about creating your own aura and crafting your own reputation and being able to demand a higher price because of it, just like Nike. The final strategy approach that I want to talk about here is what I'm calling a niche strategy or focus strategy. Think about Steve Jobs. He sold people on a product they didn't even know they needed until he invented it. When he stepped on that stage and told people that he had something for them that would allow them to store 1,000 songs and play it back, did I think for one moment that I even knew about 1,000 songs that I would want to store and play back? I don't think I did. Those who truly, though, want to take a deep dive into strategic thinking will pursue this kind of a focus strategy. They'll identify a targeted market, and they'll focus their efforts on that unique segment. Think about companies like Neiman Marcus and Lexus or Whole Foods. For you, it means knowing how you can hyper-differentiate yourself. What do you do better than anyone else, and who will pay you for it? Consider your natural talent, your unique skill set, your The question is, where is your greatest opportunity to differentiate yourself? So now what? Seeing what's next requires knowing what's past, learning what's here, and arming ourselves with some of the strategic tools that Talithia has talked about to meet the challenges of both our personal and our professional success. The measure of that success isn't necessarily in our ability to predict the future, because we all know that it turns on a dime, but it is in our ability to be strategically prepared for it. So here are some questions for you to consider. Do you have systems in place that yield optimal results? Think about in the morning. Are you looking in the bottom of your purse or your pants pocket for your keys, or are they on a hook by the door? Now translate that to your job. Are there ongoing crunch times where you and your team are expected to drop everything and join that deck with all the other hands? Is this an opportunity for you to recommend a new system or a change in an existing one? Organizations, even divisions or departments, should not have ongoing crunch times. Secondly, differentiate yourself. Do your resources and capabilities match your professional intentions? Develop a personal USP. It should be a one-sentence description of what you offer that few others can match, and that's your competitive advantage. To test it, how about finding a trusted friend or a colleague to write one for you as well? So you write yours, they write one for you that describes what they think your USP is, and then you exchange the results and see how they match up. Becoming a strategic thinker means shedding doubts and uncertainty. T went to Drexel, and one of my favorite professors from Drexel, Stanley Ridgely, said this: it means mining the past for insight on the present in order to embrace the future. And Talitha and I both hope that you've already begun considering how you will do so. And so with that, I want to pull up our last polling question to gauge your impressions of this session before we move on. Ask for any questions from our audience. If there's anything that you've typed in or that you want to ask now specific to the content that T and I have delivered today.
We covered a lot of ground. I see a couple things that are coming up in chat.
Okay.
One question: how do you determine which tools are the best to use? Yeah, great question. Great question. So the nice thing about having choice is that you are able to consider a number of options. And so with that said, I would definitely consider two key things. Number one, kind of the culture of your organization and seeing if there's a tool that either is similar in style, similar in approach, even similar in language, so that it feels more customized to your company or group. And secondly, to hone in on what the ultimate outcome is for you. So if, for example, you wanted to identify an assessment tool to understand trends in the marketplace, you might use a pest analysis to give you a really broad range of options to consider, from the political and social climate to the technological and other key environments that are market related, versus if the assessment was more an internal lay of the land and you want to get a sense of some of the internal shifts that are more critical as your outcome, then maybe the McKinsey 7S might be the best approach. So understanding the needs of your organization and customizing it to that look and feel and being really clear on the outcomes can help you discern which tool might be the most effective. Thank you for the question. Any other questions, comments? I'm kind of scrolling down to see if folks have sent anything in that I may have missed. One question I see Greetings from National Black MBAs in Philly. Welcome, Sonia. Thanks for joining. Please discuss the need for and how often to review and update the strategy. Yeah, great question. What often happens is folks will traditionally just look at it on an annual basis and think that they've done their due, which is a mistake. You know, your strategy should be looked at a minimum on a quarterly basis. And I say that because unless you're finding ways to integrate your game plan as a part of your, you know, day-to-day operations or your monthly meetings, it's easy for it to get lost and put aside. So the more rigor you put around incorporating it into your monthly planning or quarterly planning as a group, it's a great way to not only keep track of how you're doing, but it also helps to give you a preview in case you need to make changes and updates, because now you've got data points and more information by which to make your decision. Oh, now the questions are just cruising in now, I see. Okay. Another question we have is, can you give the name of the author of Deep Dive, and can we get the name of the creator of Ghost? Yes. Both the name, okay, can you give the name of the author? The name of the author is Rich Horwath. Last name is spelled Horwath. I actually have a slide right after this that gives his name and the exact title of the book, which is Deep Dive. And Rich designed the Ghost approach. I learned it in one of his workshops. I thought it was one of the most simplistic ways to understand the distinction between goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics. So there you have it. Thank you for the question. The next question. This was a great session from Nakia. Thank you, Nakia. She's from the National Association of African American Insurance Association. Awesome. Let me see if there are any other questions. Another question come in. Great webinar. Thanks for all the positive feedback, you guys. We're feeling the love. What was the name of the book recommended? Okay, so why don't we go right to the slides, the last couple slides that we have, because I do have book recommendations and links that you all sounds like would be very interested in seeing. So let's get back to the slide deck, Taylor, if you wouldn't mind. The help slide will give folks a few more resources.
If Taylor is still having difficulty, everyone should know that they will receive the entire slide deck that does have the information on Rich Horwath's book and some other tools. And we're going to be sending you out some other treats for you to read as well. So all of that information will be forthcoming, even if we can't look at it right now.
Yeah, thank you for that, Vanessa. Right. Yeah. The slide deck is going to include helpful resources, which will include Rich Horwath's name and his book. It'll include his website, strategyskills.com. It'll also make reference to NAR New Jersey has recently added a Goodreads page, our collection of recommended books, and you're able to access our page to get book recommendations across a number of different topics, and we have a whole separate category for strategy. So we invite all of you to check out our Goodreads page. Again, our deck that we send out to you following this webinar will provide all the detail for you. And then just a couple of things in closing that I wanted to make sure to mention to all of you. First off, again, I can't thank you enough for your time and energy in joining us today. A lunch hour is a pretty brave time slot to take up in someone's busy day, so we appreciate your taking time to join us. Your feedback is really important to us, good, bad, or indifferent. It's helpful in informing our go forward. So please take a moment to complete our post-webinar feedback that'll come immediately following this webinar that you'll be able to take quickly while you're online. I also invite you to follow us on Twitter at NARNJ, NAAHRNJ. We're always putting hot information, hot topics on our Twitter account, including resume tips and interviewing information, job postings, interesting articles, including Yahoo recently publishing in USA Today their lack of diversity, some just real interesting reads to keep you informed of what's happening. We want you to join our organization. You have access, of course, to webinars such as this, but as a member, you also have access to toolkits provided to only our members on topics such as strategy, on topics such as career development. You have access to assessments around your own individual development planning, so that you're able to get some data points on what your strengths are, what your opportunities are, what are areas that you can explore more closely. All of that are benefits of a member, and it's just $125 for individual membership. And if you're a student, it's only $30. So join us. We'd love to have Parents Association's 10th anniversary panel event, If I Knew What I Know Now. An executive panel being represented by CEOs and executives from Prudential, from Chubb, from the Health Insurance Exchange of New Jersey, all sharing insights and stories with regard to their own career development. Scheduled July 15th in Newark at the Prudential in Newark from 5:30 to 7:45 in the evening. It's a complimentary event with food and beverages. A number of different other organizations, professional groups have been invited, including the National Black MBAs, National Association of Black Accountants, National Sales Alliance. So it's a great opportunity for cross-functional networking and being accessible to the very top talent across New Jersey. July 15th, would love to see you. And finally, as promised, we were supposed to have our virtual raffle winner selected by the end of today's session. And so today's virtual raffle winner, drum roll please, is Claudia. I didn't expect the actual drum roll, Vanessa. Yes, with the drum roll, our winner is Claudia Hawkins. Claudia, congratulations. Yay! We love it when people register for our events early. Claudia gets a free 30-minute coaching session using the Strength Finders assessment so that she can walk away with what her top 5 strengths are and how to apply them in a robust way. So, Claudia, make sure to contact us by sending an email to info.narnewjersey@gmail.com. That's narnj@gmail.com. Again, you'll see all the detail in the slides that we're going to send you immediately following today's webinar. Looking forward to hearing from you, Claudia, and we'll coordinate getting together with you. Thank you. And with that said, I want to say we've covered all of our little closing remarks and wanting to make sure to tell you what's happening so you all can remain in the know. Again, many, many thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.